Project, I'm securing a home environment against cyber attacks. So the specific problem that I'm facing is that a family has recently moved into a new home and they want to secure their home environment against cyber attacks. So with the proliferation of desktop, mobile, and Internet of Things devices, our possession of these devices create new avenues for security vulnerabilities that may potentially expose our homes and personal devices to the penetration and access of bad actors. This exposure may allow for bad actors to gain access to our personally identifiable information, private documents, or control and take away our ability to use our own devices. So, in order to address these security concerns, we must implement security compliance rules and requirements to consistently verify the security of our devices and update them as needed to create a protected environment for their use without deprecating the device and service usability. But also, before I start going into some solutions, I want to cover some other problems. When we think about some of the impacts and risks, this is going to include, and it's not really limited to, the loss of control or unauthorized access of devices, the loss of services provided by devices, modification to provided services, weak password policies, and weak device connectivity policies. So the risk of lost control of devices has the potential to hinder, if not altogether, take away services used in our day-to-day activities. For instance, in the case of performing remote work, if an internet router has been compromised, sensitive network traffic may be intercepted and stolen from unauthenticated sources. Moreover, the loss of a router's internet services may prohibit us from using our connected devices to perform our remote work on our desktop, laptop, or smartphone. And the implication of modified service risks may allow for bad actors to not necessarily take away our use of services, but rather what it can do is add threatful functionality to services that we use daily. So again, in the case of a router that uses an established internet connection, a bad actor may make it so that our traffic is not only sent to its primary destination, but also to the bad actor themselves. This would allow for unnoticed and unauthorized gathering of massive quantities of our data for indeterminate periods of time. If users are in accordance with weak password policies, bad actors may potentially expose or modify users, bad actors may potentially expose or modify users' access to sensitive information. For instance, if users have weak passwords on their mobile device, a person could simply take that device, force their way into gaining access to the device, and take advantage of any personal applications the device uses that contain, say, like banking information or sensitive documents with like tax information. With weak device connectivity policies in place, bad actors may have the ability to gain access to our private network, which allows them to collect device information or utilize our network to perform threatening and malicious acts. With our network as the source of these malicious acts, we may even be accused of committing them. So, this is going to be affecting everyone whose devices are a part of this interconnected network. For instance, even friends who come into the network's vicinity may be within range of attack, even if they're not even on the internet or the environment's network itself. But the main people exposed are those who are always within the environment and possess computing devices that accept connections from other computing devices. So obviously, this is a significant issue that must be solved. So there's quite a few possibilities. We can create a strong password compliance policy, namely, one, we can also change default router admin password. We can restrict router configuration management interface to a single IP address. We can turn off unused services provided by the router over the internet, such as SSH or Telnet, that are not really used within the environment. We can also create software update policies. We can update all device application software. We can implement file backup policies, create roles and permissions on computing devices. We can use a VPN for even an extra layer of protection. And lastly, we can use antivirus and malware security software. So obviously some of these are going to be more beneficial for security and not as beneficial for convenience. So creating a strong password compliance policy is going to be a great way to secure devices, and it's pretty simple and it's very effective and it's really easy to reinforce. However, this may not be user friendly. It can really be easily forgotten if not stored properly, and it's pretty difficult to manage. We can change default router admin password, which is going to protect against generic, easily identifiable passwords from router providers. but this is also going to be inconvenient for the user, and it may be pretty difficult for less technically inclined in router configuration. For restricting router configuration to a single IP address, this is great because it's only a single administrative family member can manage the settings, but this can cause other family members or guests problems if there are network issues. So think about if a parent is away and the child is having internet problems, they're not really going to be able to configure the router or do anything with it because it has to be done on one IP address. So they're kind of going to be really inconvenienced by this. We can also turn off unused router services that are not used within the environment. And this is going to be great because unauthenticated users are enabled to remotely access personal devices, but this is definitely going to require a lot of research and education of router services that I don't think that a normal person is going to do. And it's pretty difficult for the less technologically inclined. We can create device software update policies. This is great because the devices won't suffer from threats from outdated software whose security has been compromised. But also this is going to require a certain level of application organization, but nothing that I think is too inconvenient. We can also update all device application software, which is great because bad actors cannot use exposed vulnerabilities and threats for outdated software. But the best services are going to be pretty costly, and this is also going to require a lot of organization and time management. We can implement file backups, which is going to mitigate damage of lost access to files by allowing them to exist in multiple places. But the storage of duplicate files typically costs a lot of money, and the existence of files in more than one place creates even new security threats that have to be solved. We also can create roles and permissions on computing devices, and this is going to access to administrative services are limited only to authorized users. So this is going to be great because the roles and permissions can be modified at any given time, and it's only going to be able to be done so by the authorized users. However, this is kind of similar to the other issue because an urgent need for elevated privileges may be inaccessible. So if the router messes up and the child needs to fix the internet, she's not going to have permission to access the router. So that's going to be pretty inconvenient. Using a VPN for an additional layer of protection is great because the internet traffic is more difficult to track and the confidentiality of data within the traffic is never compromised. However, this is costly and their applications are not common knowledge. Like, I don't think the average person would be paying for a VPN for an extra layer of protection. And lastly, we're going to use antivirus and malware security software. This is great. I mean, it requires little to no technological knowledge and it's extremely inexpensive, but it can interfere with the usability of devices, just in the sense that there will be like pop-ups all the time telling you to update your software, which is just purely inconvenient. And actually, some of the free security software is malicious, so it kind of is counteractive unless you know you're not downloading a virus. So when I was evaluating my solutions, I followed 5 steps. One is going to be strong password policy is followed. Secondly, the device access denied to unauthorized and unauthenticated sources. Device software up to date. Usability of device and services not affected by increased security. And lastly, device files inaccessible without proper permissions. So my final solution for this family, when I considered the rating between, security and convenience, I think the most balanced solutions are these 6 steps. So creating that strong password compliance policy, changing the default router admin password, creating device software update policies, implementing file backup policies, creating roles and permissions on computing devices, and using antivirus and malware security software are really going to be great steps for this family to take to secure their home environment. And I don't think that it's going to be too inconvenient, especially with the internet. You can educate yourself on all of these topics just as I did. I know nothing about this, and it only took me a day to research how to secure a home environment. So I think if someone is really looking to secure their home in the best way, I think these 6 steps would be a great first step.